Welcome to the Poverty Reduction Network of Sarnia-Lambton's annual Stand Up Against Poverty event. In the spirit of peace and friendship, we honor the Anishinaabe of the Three Fires Confederacy, on whose traditional territory we are gathered. I'm Karen Mathewson, a community legal worker and paralegal with Community Legal Assistance Sarnia and chair of the local Poverty Reduction Network. We, like many organizations across the country during the COVID-19 crisis, have had to figure out how to safely mark October 17th, the United Nations International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Instead of our usual outdoor rally, attended by hundreds, we are safely physically distancing indoors at the Inn of the Good Shepherd with a small group of people, and live streaming the event thanks to David Burrows. October 17th is the day designated by the UN in 1993 to promote awareness of the need to eradicate poverty around the world. This day represents an opportunity to acknowledge the effort and struggle of people living in poverty, a chance for people to make their voices heard. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on those trying to survive on limited incomes. Now more than ever, it is important to hear their voices and to ask our governments to implement policies that provide safe housing, sustainable incomes, and access to vital services. Today, we will hear from people who have experienced poverty. We will also hear about local poverty statistics and about what we are asking governments to do to help eradicate poverty. I would like to welcome our first speaker, Tamara.
Hello everyone. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Tamara. I live in a wonderful little town named Forest, and I'm a single mother with 2 kids on welfare. On Ontario Works. My favorite way to relax by myself is a hot bath and a good book, but I get the same relaxing feeling by being around my family. I'm shy at first until I've warmed up to you. I'm terrible at talking about myself, and I enjoy long walks on the beach. With that many cliches said, I started sounding like a bad dating profile pretty quick, didn't I? Let's dig into the first cliche sentence I said to you, though. I'm a single mother with 2 kids on Ontario Works. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's welfare. Single mother of 2 kids on welfare. What were some of the first thoughts that popped into your head when I said that? Were they something like, great, another welfare case? Or, with 2 kids, why doesn't she just get a job to support them? No? How about dirty, uneducated, unmotivated, and this lovely one, lazy? I think the worst one I've had the displeasure of hearing in my life was, you don't support your kids with the working tax-paying people do, while you do nothing. If none of those thoughts went through your head when I said that I'm a single mother with 2 kids on welfare, then I value your compassion greatly. If a few of those did go through your heads, then hopefully what I have to say here today can change that a little bit. Because every time someone has a thought like that, it just adds to the stigma of what being on Ontario Works means. I can't speak to anyone else's experiences in life, but I can tell you a bit about my own and what it has taken to get where I am now. I am someone who was raised in generational poverty. What this means is that my mother lived in poverty because she was raised in poverty by her mother and so on. It also means that statistically, my future looked to keep the pattern going, which it did. As a young adult, I did just that. I let the pattern keep going. I didn't work because I wasn't taught that ethic. I went to school because I had to. When I was 17, I got pregnant from a summer fling with a boy from school. I tried to keep going to school, but being home and pregnant just seemed better, so I stopped. At 18, I had a newborn baby and not a clue of what to do with myself. So I coasted while my son grew up. I think he was about 4, which made me 22, when I started trying to do career courses and attempted to go back to school. School seemed harder. I decided I couldn't do it, so I stopped. I reached out to my Ontario Works worker to help me with any programs I could do and was basically treated as if I was just another file to them. No care in whether I succeeded or not. I went into a career program, got out of that program, and was left alone by my worker. No follow-up from her, no check-ins with her. I believe I went a year without even speaking to her. The next year, I was pregnant again and had my second son. This time, the relationship was abusive as he developed a drug addiction. It took me 3 years to get away from that situation. I left Hamilton completely and moved to Forest, where my family lived. From there, it took a year to start building my mental health back to strength. I was still on Ontario Works, and it was hard living in Forest and not being a driver. That put a huge barrier in front of me. Anyone who knows Forest knows that you need the ability to go outside of town for anything, really. The grocery store in town is Foodland and pretty expensive. A person who can drive would just go somewhere else for a huge cart of groceries so that it's cheaper. But for someone who didn't drive, making my money and groceries stretch as far as I could was a trick I needed to learn. In 2017, I moved into the townhouse that I rented, and my Ontario Works worker referred me to a program called Getting Ahead, where I went into Lambton circles. The program made me look at my life differently. I no longer felt like I was a zero, like I was lazy and worth nothing. These wonderful people and the programs had me realize that from the very beginning of my life, I didn't have the tools or means to excel in life. I had a mother just barely able to support us and raise us, and she was doing what she was taught as well. So where some people see a person on Ontario Works and might think they're lazy, it could be so much more than that. It's not easy to break a cycle that generations have instilled in your family. From the beginning of my journey with Getting Ahead and now Circles, I have gotten an unmeasurable amount of support. And I don't mean financially, really. I mean having people understand me, encourage me, and show me compassion like I've never felt. That support makes all the difference. I went from not thinking or caring about my future at all to being so focused on my future that it's sometimes frustrating to have to wait for things to start. I now have my license and a vehicle. I'm working at finishing my grade 12 to get my diploma. And I have plans for college and dreams of opening my own business way down the road. To think of all these accomplishments I've done in the past 3 years is pretty crazy to me, because throughout those 3 years I still had crisis after crisis pop up. They just didn't stop me. I'm striving for greatness in myself because I know that my struggle to break a cycle right now will mean my kids grow up seeing the hard work and doing that from their young lives, which will mean I have changed the future for my future generations. So assuming I haven't put any of you to sleep, now that you know a bit of my story, when I say I'm a single mother of 2 kids on Ontario Works, have your thoughts changed at all? Just because you know some of the silent and hidden struggles I went through? If your thoughts are more positive now, I'm glad, and thank you. But my hopes for our future as people are that at some point we won't have to know a person's past or their struggles in order to give them a positive thought. Hopefully the stigma and judgment on people in poverty can change, because we all come into the world the same way, naked, crying, and looking for guidance. It's why we should never be quick to judge, and why we should always at least try to understand each other. A bit of compassion from one another could change a person's world completely. It did for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara, for that brave, courageous, and hopeful story. I'd like to introduce the Warden of Lambton County, Mr. Bill Weber.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here to bring greetings on behalf of the county. We hear stories like we just heard. It really touches your heart, and it makes you believe in people that can make a change with the programs that are available. It gives hope to those that are still looking to make that change. We come together, recognize United Nations International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Within Lambton County, there are over 7,000 individuals living below the low-income cutoff, which represents more than 6% of Lambton's population experience poverty. During COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the need increase for food security, mental health supports, and job recovery, especially within single household families. Lambton Circles is an effective poverty alleviation strategy which helps people transition out of poverty by building intentional relationships across the community identifying barriers that keep people in poverty and implementing innovative solutions. Circles has supported more than 210 local individuals and families since inception towards full self-sufficiency. Most recently, the County of Lambton revised the 10-year Housing and Homeless Plan, which builds on the vision of social services to make opportunities available that enrich lives and build a thriving community. Lambton County remains committed to leading the coordination of our local services and building upon the vital community partnerships to ensure all residents have the resources needed to live in a healthy, quality life. Together, we can end poverty within the County of Lambton. You can learn more about how the County of Lambton is addressing your community's concerns at our website, lambtononline.ca. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden Weber. Our next guest is Caitlin, who is going to share her story with us.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Krywicki, and this is my journey through poverty. I'm not much of a public speaker, at least when it comes to talking about myself, but Circles has helped me so much, so I'm here to try and give back. I hope I can inspire at least one person, like hearing these stories before inspired me, knowing that I'm not alone. Growing up for me was okay. Looking back, I say we were lower middle class. We had enough money to get by, but we definitely did not keep up with the Joneses. We likely were very close to poverty at any given time. After my sister was born, my mother couldn't juggle work and home, so she ended up staying home, cutting my family's income in half. So we didn't have sports, extracurriculars, or even vacations like many of my peers. But my parents were very resourceful to keep us entertained. A simple pad of paper and some pencil crayons my dad rescued from the recycling at work ignited my passion for the arts. At school, I did well academically, and that's probably why no one thought or cared that I struggled socially with school. When I was 12 years old, I had my first seizure. I fell down a flight of stairs, or that's what I'm told. I don't remember much beyond opening the door of the community center. Becoming epileptic would greatly shape the rest of my life. I struggled finding medication that worked, and then finding a dose that left me with enough energy to still function. Spoiler alert, it was about 24 years before that magic dose was found. While experimenting with doses, it was very hard on my physical and mental health. Before having seizures, I'd been pretty straight edge. I had no interest or curiosity in drugs or alcohol. But now I felt like my brain didn't work anyway, so what was the worst that could happen? I started drinking and smoking cannabis. All these things combined led to my schoolwork declining and eventually dropping out of school in grade 11. Although by chance in grade 11, that summer, right after I dropped out, I got hooked up with the virtual co-op program through a friend I was partying with. I earned all my credits by going to work and writing journals. I had to go to summer school to finish grade 12, but I ended up graduating the same time I would have if I had attended physical school. I wish this was the end of my story. I could say that I went to college and I lived happily ever after, but my true journey was just beginning. Even though I managed to finish high school and get a job, I never confronted my demons and my addiction grew. No longer living with my parents, things spiraled. I think I went to class at Fanshawe 6 or 7 times. I mostly stayed home, got drunk, and high with my roommates. The couple assignments I did hand in, I got great grades, but I just wasn't motivated. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I'd spent the last few years just surviving my seizures, and I had no idea what I was doing, so I drank even more. It's also important to note at this point in my life, I'm not even 19, so to get alcohol, I had questionable friendships and relationships. I failed my first semester of college and dropped out. I stayed in London, though, till my lease was up in the spring. I moved back to Sarnia and continued to drink and live impulsively. I got into harder drugs. I made bad decision after bad decision. I was essentially homeless, floating from friends' couches to motels. Although I could have went back to my parents, I couldn't face them right now. Then, before things got completely out of control, something grounded me and brought me back down to sober reality. At the end of July 2009, I found out I had become pregnant with my first son. This was the starting of an abusive relationship with my children's father that would go on for 6 years, and where I truly started to experience poverty. Even though I remained sober, raising your children with an addict all of your money is going towards his addiction. My son was born and our money problems just got tighter. I blocked a lot of this time period out of my mind, the fine details that is, just to put me in a better headspace today, so I'm going to skip over it pretty quickly. I was using every food bank and resource I could, but we still didn't have enough money to cover everything. I remember many times choosing food over laundry soap. I was resilient, though, with my limited funds. This is when extreme couponing really started to take off, and I hopped on the wagon. I know there's probably a lot of cashiers I gave a hard time, but I thank you for your patience. I remember being so happy one time I got 12 free boxes of crackers. I became pregnant a year later. My mental health continued to decline. I tried to hang myself. It felt like no one cared. I was so shut off from the world. I felt stuck in my relationship, and I didn't want to let another child down. Then I started going to the Lochiel drop-in, a place that I loved as a child, and I found hope again. I got involved with a young moms group, and I saw I wasn't alone with my problems. I made some amazing friends, and I met the coordinator, Denise McKinley. She helped me in many ways, but most importantly, she believed in me when it felt like nobody else did. It helped me get through a lot of dark times. My second son was born in March. This is where I'd start my journey out of poverty. One day, the group brought in Martine from Circles. My friend Nikki had just started the program, and it sounded amazing seeing how it had helped her, so I was sold. I had just lost my job as a cleaner at the plants, one that I didn't really like, but we really needed the money, and I had gone through a painful miscarriage. I was ready for a fresh start. I took Focus, a pre-Circles workshop, in spring 2013. There was a waiting list to get into Circles, but I also had some personal barriers in my way. Keeping a phone line or any way to get a hold of me was very hard. It just wasn't a priority. I had so many different numbers over the years you could start a phone book. I would always ask my OW worker to check to see where I was on the Circles list, but I never really heard back. I got pregnant again at the end of 2013. My relationship with my child's father at this point was toxic. I didn't want to be hurt anymore. Instead of doing the logical thing, ending the relationship, which isn't as easy as you think when you're in poverty with shared OW, apartment, and going to a women's shelter is a scary experience, I decided to hurt him back. I wasn't able to physically hurt him, so I did so emotionally. I did things I greatly regret and went against everything I believed in, and in the end left me more alone and hurt than ever before. My youngest son was born in 2014. Then one day I ran into Martine at the grocery store, so I asked her myself if she had room in her circle yet. She said no, but we went for coffee. I kept running into her and asking her, and finally she said yes in winter 2016. We talked about goals, and I told her I wanted to help people and work with kids. She encouraged me to go back to school and said they could help me pay off my defaulted OSAP. At the same time, my grandma saw I was getting my life together and offered to pay it off. I enrolled in child and youth care for the fall of 2016, and I was paired with my ally Heather Saunders at Circles later that year. My relationship with my children's father finally came to an end that summer with a traumatizing domestic violence incident that left him in prison. As much as I love him, the addiction had taken over. I couldn't let my children grow up thinking that this was normal. I couldn't help him anymore. Shortly after, and in no relation to the previous incident, my son was diagnosed with autism. I was relieved now I could get the help he needed, and a doctor finally believed me after being dismissed prior by family, friends, and medical staff. The summer was rough. Getting used to doing everything on my own was a challenge, but I made it through. I had finally got into subsidized housings for the fall as well. Going back to school, raising 3 boys as a single mom was challenging, but nowhere near as hard as raising 3 boys and an addict. My goal was just to pass, but I got an A on my first assignment, and my perfectionist standards kicked in. It wasn't hard, though. This theory came natural to me, and I was always good at essays and self-reflection. I did my first and second year placements. Nothing on its own was super hard, but doing everything together, coordinating our family life was, and still is. So when a friend started to help me, it was hard to turn down the help. He wasn't my boyfriend, but it was complicated. He taught me how to drive now that I was seizure-free, helped me with my kids. We went on adventures together. He helped me a lot when the college strike happened. Everything was going great. I was acing my classes. I had done so well in placement, I had been hired as staff for the Big Brothers Big Sisters after school and summer program. We went on another adventure to celebrate that I'd been hired, and that turned into a nightmare. He got violently manic, and among other injuries, my hair was forcibly shaved off. By the end, my children and I were staying at the women's interval home. Having my hair cut off wasn't physically difficult, but it was because people kept mentioning it, putting me back in that dark place mentally. I didn't want to explain to most people why it had happened, and I knew the people that knew were just trying to make me feel better, but it really wasn't. The best thing somebody told me around that time was an employee at Lids complimented my shoes. During the summer 2018, my father passed away. He didn't get to see me graduate, but he was proud of me and how far I'd come. He got to see me doing a job I loved. I would come and visit him every day on my lunch at the hospital. What would have been my final year of college would prove to be my toughest yet. I was trying to balance family life, court, school, placement, cleaning my dad's home, and everything else. I was burning out, but refusing to acknowledge it. I dropped out of placement reluctantly, meaning I would need to come back for another year to graduate. After a burst pipe at my dad's old house, my mom and I came up with the idea to give the house to Habitat to fix out so someone else could benefit. Taking the extra year to finish paid off. I could invest myself more into placement now that my previous stressors had settled. When the COVID lockdown started and school all switched to digital, it was a different situation to manage, but I made it through. I graduated high school digitally. I had a drive-by grad, and I finished my program with honors this past June. I paid off all my debts, including OSAP. I hope to get a job supporting my family doing what I love soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for sharing your story. We admire your courage and your strength, and all of our best wishes to you and to Tamara. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Myles Vanni, Executive Director of the Inn of the Good Shepherd.
Thank you, Karen, and again, thank you to our speakers as well. It's inspiring to hear the strength of those individuals to overcome the challenges that poverty faces. We often think of the challenge of poverty as being just food, maybe just shelter, but there's so much more that complicates people's lives and traps them in poverty. As a community, we gather every year for our rally, and we talk about some of the successes and the progress that we've made, and we have made tremendous success and progress in this community. But this particular year has been a big setback in terms of trying to eliminate and alleviate poverty. When COVID struck, that new word that became an everyday word, unprecedented, completely describes what we're facing in our community. COVID has provided an impact that is so far-reaching into all sectors, all aspects of our lives, from employment, from massive layoffs and job losses, to food shortages, to housing shortages, to social isolation and schools and businesses shutting down. And we've seen families coming into agencies for services and supports that have never reached out to us before because of this far-reaching impact. And of course, it's lasting longer than any of us would have imagined back in March. On March 13th, that fateful day when the schools were announced closed and businesses shut down, everybody expected a month or two or maybe a few months, certainly not the length of time here. When that shutdown happened, there were a lot of scrambling as people reacted to it, and a lot of places closed down, shut down. But food banks, shelters, service agencies, they began to step up and to run into that building, to become those new first responders, as we recognized and had to make the commitment that people need to be fed, need to be sheltered, and that need was even greater than ever before. In talking to folks as they were struggling through this and watching what was happening in the grocery stores and the panic shopping and not being able to get toilet paper, so many people we talked to, their greatest fear was being left behind. They didn't have the resources to be able to get to the grocery store and purchase what they needed because they'd just been laid off. They just lost their job. And they were afraid that, what are we going to do? We're going to be left behind. But again, the social agencies, the food banks, the shelters stepped up to make sure that nobody was left behind. The challenge was, where do we get those resources? With everything shut down here at the inn, we lost in a matter of a couple of weeks our two largest food drives, Construction and Cyclone Aid. That was 80,000 pounds of food that we lost. That was a value of $250,000. And regular donors like churches and schools, they were shut down. So there was a real concern about where do we get those resources. But I love the fact that we live in Sarnia-Lambton, because this community knows how to pull together and how to support each other. And community organizations and businesses and individuals, and with tremendous leadership and support from our public health and from our Lambton County, we've been able to respond to the greater need. We've seen an increase of 40% in the number of households accessing food, the number of visits that we're facing, the number of meals that we're having to provide. That's a tremendous increase in need in our community. We recognize that families couldn't get into the food bank because they had children at home. They weren't at school, so they couldn't get here. They couldn't leave them with family or friends. They couldn't leave them alone. And again, our community came through. We saw agencies that were starting to do home visits to check on families, and we partnered with the Circles program, with YMCA, with Children's Aid, to be able to deliver food boxes and fresh food packages right into the hands of those families that couldn't get out of their homes. Through that community support, we provided over 6,000 emergency food boxes delivered to people that needed, 2,500 meal boxes for people that were shut in and needed meals, or in our shelter services program. So the community pulling together meant we were looking after each other. And most importantly, we really wanted to try to provide a sense of normal in something that was anything but normal. So we kept the mobile market program going. We got the snack pack program, started that early to fill that gap in nutrition because there were no student nutrition programs. We were able to provide school kits to make sure kids had the right tools for learning and the masks needed for protection to be able to return back to school in September. This tremendous effort from the community has meant we're able to serve these people. Shelter became a particularly concerning issue, and still is of great concern. Prior to COVID, we started with 35 people in shelter. Now we've reached as many as 180 people on any given night in shelter. We found that people who were precariously housed, because a lot of our homeless in Sarnia, they're precariously housed. They're kind of hidden homeless. They're couch surfing. They're staying with a family or friends. They're staying in the basement or such. But once COVID hit, people started to worry about their own personal safety and having people from outside of their household, outside of their bubble, in their homes, staying on their couch or in their basement. And people were asked to leave. And so these people who were precariously housed all of a sudden became homeless. And that grew our numbers tremendously, as I said, as high as 180 people some nights. So we've had a tremendous effort in terms of helping to make sure these people are housed and stayed safe, that they're not moving around in the community, so that they're not creating an opportunity for spread. And we've been able to serve those people well, again, because of the community response. The Lambton County Social Services Department and Public Health have worked tremendously with us to try to put together the plans to care for people, and now to be able to get people back housed. And over the last month or so, we've been able to get 50 people out of the shelters, out of motels, out of the overflow units, and into their own housing. So that's tremendous success in trying to move forward. There's a cliche, there's so many cliches now with COVID, but one of them is we're stronger together. And I think it really is more than a cliche, it is fact. We are stronger together because everybody has been pitching in and donating and serving and helping. And most importantly, we're stronger together, but also our community is better served. So in these dark days, when we think back to where poverty was a year ago, and we're in a much more difficult, precarious position, there is some light as we pull together and continue to pull together as a community, that we can tackle the poverty issues. There's still a lot to do, and it's going to be a long haul, but I know as a community we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Myles. As we approach the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty on October 17th, we need to ensure a recovery that fulfills the needs and aspirations of everyone, not only those of a privileged few. The Poverty Reduction Network has endorsed the Just Recovery Ontario campaign's request that government and policy makers commit to the following 5 steps to build a recovery that works for everyone. We need government and policymakers to create adequate and accessible income supports, ensure decent work with fair pay, benefits, and protections in safe workplaces, expand and preserve safe, adequate, and affordable housing, invest in access to basic services like childcare, transportation, digital access, and elder care, and to establish tax policies that make sure people with the highest incomes pay their fair share. To support the campaign and to access more information about the campaign, go to www.justrecoveryontario.ca, which will be shown on your screens. Homelessness and affordable housing issues are of increasing concern in Sarnia-Lambton as we see more people couch surfing, losing their accommodations, and have less and less affordable housing options. In 2019, the Social Planning Department of Lambton County costed out the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment and how much a person would have to earn to be able to afford it. Average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment is $950 a month. A person would have to earn $18.27 an hour to be able to afford it. Right now, our minimum wage is $14.25 an hour. A single person receiving Ontario Works receives a maximum of $733 a month, and a person receiving Ontario Disability Benefits receives $1,169 a month, maximum. These rates and the minimum wage fall far short of being able to afford decent housing. Is it any surprise food bank usage continues to increase every year? While minimum wage and social assistance rates are set by the province, and the province needs to increase both, the federal government could alleviate poverty by implementing serious poverty and homelessness reduction strategies. Dignity for All, a campaign led by Citizens for Public Justice and Canada Without Poverty, has a vision to create a poverty-free and more socially secure and cohesive Canada. We join with the Dignity for All campaign in their calling on the federal government to fulfill their legal obligation to protect people's rights to an adequate standard of living and to end poverty in Canada by 2030. To set specific targets to end poverty and improve measures of well-being and equity among communities experiencing systemic oppression, and to prioritize funding for strategies that reduce poverty and improve measures of well-being and equity among communities experiencing systemic oppression. To support the campaign or to access more information about the campaign, please go to www.chewonthis.ca, and that will be on your screens also. I'd like to welcome Kim Godin, who is going to lead us along with reading the Poverty Pledge. Thank you.
First off, I also want to, on behalf of Lambton Circles, really heartfelt thank you for Tamara and Caitlin sharing their personal story. It takes a lot of courage, and we got to really hear the resiliency and strength that these two individuals have within them and the barriers they've overcome. So a sincere thank you to both of them. Viewing audience, if you can see the pledge, please read along with me. We are standing now with members of our community to show our commitment to the fight against poverty and inequity. We are standing because we want our government leaders to honor their promises to meet the Millennial Development Goals, and we ask them to exceed these goals. We join in solidarity with the people from hundreds of countries to say, to the leaders of the wealthy countries, we urge you to keep your promises on poverty, debt cancellation, more and better aid, trade justice, and gender equality. To the leaders of poorer countries, make it your first responsibility to save the lives of your poorest citizens. We ask our own government leaders to tackle inequality, to be accountable to your people, to govern fairly and justly, to fight corruption, and to fulfill human rights. Today and every day, we will stand up and take action against poverty. We will continue to fight against poverty and inequality and hold our leaders to their promises. We are asking not for charity, but for justice. We are millions of voices standing in solidarity to say, no more excuses, end poverty now. Thank you.
Well, again, we say thank you for joining us for our Stand Up Against Poverty rally, for saying together as a community that poverty isn't right and we need to end this. And we need to support those that are living in poverty to raise above it and to help those agencies that are working to end poverty. We want to thank our speakers, Tamara and Caitlin, again, for the courage that they have to stand up and to share their story and to be that shining light, that leadership to help to let people know that we can beat poverty and our lives can be better. Thank you to Warden Weber for joining us and for the tremendous support that the county and the leadership that the county has provided over this pandemic, but over the years as well, as they provide real resources to help move people out of poverty. And I also want to thank Dave Burrows from the show for broadcasting this and taping this for us. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the crisp fall that we're facing. And again, thank you for joining us. All the best.